Hello and welcome to the channel. In today's video, or should I say this evening's video, we're in Edinburgh and you've seen the title. We're going to be telling a few spooky stories, ghost stories. But today's vlog is not going to be led by myself. It's actually going to be Tash for the very first time leading the vlog. She's going to be telling you guys the stories and she's actually from Edinburgh. I'm familiar with some of the places here, but not 100%. So Tash is going to be bringing us along on the journey and getting us a wee bit spooky. So let's go. So the part of Edinburgh we're in now is known as the Grass Market. And what's so special about the Grass Market?
The Grass Market was where the gallows used to be, where everyone would come and watch people being hung.
And am I right in saying that it's also in the old town?
Yes, it is in the old town, just at the bottom of the crags of the castle.
So yeah, let's go and check that out. We've came up this wee alleyway here, kind of hidden out of the way so we can film the intro and get this first wee bit for you. But let's go down into the Grass Market and see what it's all about and get some spooky stories on the go. So you might be wondering why I've brought you to the face of a pub called Maggie Dixon's, which is conveniently placed right next to the last drop. And this is going to bring us to where our first story begins. So I'll hand you over to Tash and she's going to give you a little bit of the history of the Grass Market.
So you might be wondering, where has Callum left us? I am currently stood in the Grass Market. That probably doesn't mean anything to you right now, but back in the 17 and 1600s, this was the main source of entertainment for a lot of people. The Grass Market was home to Edinburgh's main section of gallows, and if you don't know what the gallows are, you're lucky, because this is where everyone from witches, supposedly, to treason, to anything that they could think of.
Basically any sort of criminal.
Basically. You would get hung for it. Even if you were innocent, you'd still probably get hung, just for folks' entertainment. And behind us, we've got a pub here called Maggie Dixon's. And Maggie Dixon was an exception to the hanging, and I'll tell you why. So who is Maggie Dixon? Back in 1724, she was convicted and found herself here at the Grass Market in the gallows to be sentenced and hung. Why was she sentenced, you might wonder? Well, she found herself pregnant from one of the men that was in her employer's housing that she looked after, and because she was a woman in the 1700s, she had to conceal her pregnancy to keep her job. So she unfortunately had a baby that had passed, and she left it supposedly on the riverbank. Whether or not these were natural causes is to be up in the air.
Yeah, so the baby died basically.
Yes. Unfortunately, yes. So she was found, the baby was found, and they tracked down the mother, obviously, and she was sentenced to be hung. Even though there was no known evidence to convict her, she was just a woman in the 1700s, so she was hung anyway. It's not easy being a woman in the 1700s, clearly.
Is that coming from experience?
I might have been a witch back in the day.
A little bit of time travel here.
So,
wait, are you Maggie Dixon?
No. Maybe.
Anyway, Maggie Dixon. What happened to Maggie?
Was sentenced to be hung here in the gallows, and she was hung. She was hung for a good 30 minutes to make sure she was nice and dead, popped in a coffin, and off to Musselburgh she went in a wee horse and cart. However, the wagon driver got a little bit tired, so he pulled over to the side of the road. Is that a road back then? Cobblestone? I'm unsure.
Yeah, it's still a road.
He pulled over to the side of the road, got out for a wee break, only to hear muffled noises coming from within the coffin. And if I was him, I wouldn't have opened the coffin, but he did, to find Maggie Dixon very much alive. And because she was alive, she was free to go. She had served her sentence, she'd been hung, so she got up and walked home from Musselburgh. Simple as that.
As you do.
Yeah.
And now we have her to commemorate in the form of a pub where people seem to be getting very, very drunk.
I think she's known as Half Hang It Maggie.
Half Hang at Maggie.
Half Hang at Maggie. And she lived for several decades later, so
That's crazy.
hence the pub.
So there we have the story of Maggie Dixon. A very big thank you to Tash for telling that one. It wouldn't have been easy considering it is a Friday night and we're in Edinburgh and we are surrounded by pubs and clubs. So there's a lot of drunk people running around right now. But we're now off to our next filming location for the next story. So stay tuned because this one, I've heard it before and it's definitely a good one. So we've made it to the next location for the next part of our ghost stories. We're in Grayfriars Kirkyard. Now you might have heard of this place, maybe. If not, there's a very, very famous story about a dog called Grayfriars Bobby. If you're interested, then there is lots of information online about that. Feel free to go and look that up. But what we're about to tell you is a little bit on the darker side. So we're going to go over back with Tash again and she's going to take it from there.
So as Callum left off, we are stood in Grayfriars Kirkyard in front of my dream home, because who wouldn't want to look out to this if Callum pans around the lovely view outside these lucky folks' kitchen windows.
Well, if that's what you're into.
We'll move here one day, don't kid yourself. Anyway,
Okay.
So a wee bit of information about Grayfriars Kirkyard is back in the day it was relatively flat. However, if you've ever been here, you'll know it's quite hilly and there's a lot of slopes and bumps and different sections, and that is because of the sheer amount of bodies that were piled upon piled upon piled back in the day, especially plague victims, because there was nowhere else to bury them, so they just kept piling them on here. And sometimes it has been known when it rains, because the ground is not that deep between the layers of bodies and the ground that you're walking on, the bones just pop right out the ground. And it has been known that when you can walk around and it's raining, you can see little bits of bone pop out the ground if you're lucky.
Well, if you'd call that lucky.
I would call it lucky.
Maybe not so lucky if you're
wouldn't call it lucky.
a little scaredy pants, but
No.
yeah.
But we are going to go round to George McKenzies Coliseum, and he is the known poltergeist of this graveyard. So on that lovely note, let's go.
So we're walking around to the Coliseum and I don't know, what sort of... Do you feel...
There was a wee mouse just right, look.
Oh yeah. We're getting distracted, but as we make our way around to this Coliseum, I don't know, this place just feels kind of eerie. Do you get that vibe?
I do get that vibe. I came here a lot when I was growing up, so it probably doesn't give me the same vibe as someone who hasn't spent a weird amount of time in here. But no, it does have an eeriness about it, especially when you know that there's so many people buried beneath your feet.
Yeah, all the bodies and that little story about the bones, that's a wee bit creepy. But yeah, I think just the sun has, well, it still looks like it's setting, but it has actually set, and the whole sort of city lights just reflecting on the gravestones and
there is
things
some of
like
the
that.
nicest looking gravestones I've ever seen in this graveyard. They're very ornate looking.
Yeah, it's a beautiful graveyard, I'll give it that, but it's very eerie, very spooky, especially as the lights go down. We'll show you some of the gravestones now. I'll turn you around in a wee sec, but yeah, if you're here, you're definitely going to feel the intense feelings as you walk around these graves. Yeah, just look at the detail on that. Is that a tomb?
Just a very rich man's coffin. Or gravestone even.
Yeah,
You'd
have to be extremely rich if you wanted something that size. I'm going to guess that they're very important, possibly. Feel free to correct me in the comment section, but I'm pretty sure the skull and crossbones on that grave was to signify that someone died of the plague. I could be wrong with that, but I'm pretty sure that that is the reason. However, just next to it, you'll notice this, and it looks like a bit of a, I'm going to say prison cell. It's either to keep someone from going in, or it's going to get dark here, but it could be to keep something from getting out.
So I'm currently stood in front of Covenanters prison, and just a stone's throw down that way is George McKenzie's Coliseum. And you're probably wondering, what is the connection? Well, George McKenzie was the judge who sentenced all the prisoners within this prison to death, inhumane conditions. It goes on. I'll get to that in a moment, however. So you might wonder why we're not inside the prison. Well, the stuff that goes on inside here is so graphic and so dangerous to the public that Edinburgh Council thought, we must lock this up and only allow paying tour guides in. You need to question that one. However, over 1,200 prisoners were held captive behind these very gates. Why, you might ask? They literally only wanted to practice their religion with freedom and without any interruption. But George McKenzie said no, that's not going to happen. So the 1,200 people got locked behind these gates. Back in the day, it was basically just a field, and they were given maybe 4 ounces of bread a day, which is pittance. I think that's maybe like a slice of bread, nothing else. And they were kept here. Most died, whether they were hung in the gallows in the grass market or whether they died of starvation. Only, I think it was around 250 made out alive out of the 1,200 people. So George McKenzie was a very, very nasty man.
Okay, so a quick change of plan. There seems to be a fair few tours going on. It's a Friday night. I don't know what we expected with that one, but there's a fair few tours. So the little bit about George McKenzie, our next ghosty guest. We're moving away. There's some better lighting here as well, but we do want to give the tour some space. So over to Tash.
Back in 1999, a homeless man on a terrible night, he was absolutely pouring it down, was aiming to seek shelter within this graveyard. He was eyeing up George McKenzie's tomb and thought, that looks like a great place to sleep for the night. So he found himself inside the tomb by breaking open the lock, trying to prise open George McKenzie's coffin, where he took a step back and took a tumble straight through the grating that was on the floor. Now, he didn't have a hard landing. He landed on a lot of plague victims' bodies and bones, which probably isn't the nicest landing, but at least it wasn't solid.
Quite a hard landing then.
It's not solid ground. The bones broke his fall a wee bit. Anyway, so as you can imagine, you're surrounded by bones. It probably stinks. He looks up and sees a big shadowy figure looking over him, probably absolutely shitting himself. Let's not beat around the bush. So he ran up the stairs, could have just went down the stairs in the first place, ran up the stairs, out the Coliseum, and to this day, that is the event that supposedly angered big Mr. George McKenzie. So we're currently stood having a wee conflab, and the light that we're using to film this went off and then just pops back on again. So that's a bit weird, isn't it? Maybe George doesn't like that we're telling a wee story about him. But anyway, back to George's antics. It has been known that since the incident in 1999, many people have reported when they're near the prison or his vault that they've either felt a burning sensation, they've left with bite marks, scratches. There's even been 2 exorcisms taking place within this graveyard to try and rid the negative energy that McKenzie brings. And one of the weird things about the exorcism that took place was the exorcist himself, a week later, died of a heart attack. Now, it's probably not related, but it also probably could be. So if you're ever visiting the graveyard, just keep a wee eye on your shoulder and check your body after in case you've been left with any unsuitable marks.
And there we have our second guest of tonight's ghosty adventures, George McKenzie.
Big bloody Mackenzie.
Yeah, big bloody McKenzie. Now, off to our final location. It's up by Edinburgh Castle. Now, this one's a wee bit funny, so it should lighten the mood to end it on a high. Now, Edinburgh Castle, let's go. Now, we did mention tours, and there's also a ghost bus tour. So, yeah.
So we've just walked past Deacon Brodie's tavern, and yet another person with a pub named after them in Edinburgh. Shock horror. So, who was Deacon Brodie? Well, he was born William Brodie, and he was a very well-skilled carpenter and a councillor to the city of Edinburgh. So he was doing really good deeds during the day, repairing people's locks and helping out the locals. And by night he was burgling their houses to fund his gambling addiction and 5 mistresses, to which he had 5 children for. So he wasn't the nicest man in the world, and he's often thought to be the inspiration for the Jekyll and Hyde story that I'm sure everyone has heard about. Now, Deacon Brodie was found guilty eventually after his crimes, and he was sentenced to be hung in the gallows in the Grassmarket where we've just been, and he was sentenced to be hung in front of 40,000 people, and you can imagine that's quite the day out for them. 40,000 people would fill out, I don't know, a Harry Styles concert these days, but they were stood in the Grassmarket watching this man be killed, which is quite the thought really, isn't it? And if you take a look round the Museum of Scotland here in Edinburgh, you can actually see the lockpicks that he used to commit these crimes, and these were the lockpicks that also helped prosecute him for what he done. And he was never honoured with a gravestone. He was put in an unmarked grave, which has now been turned into a car park. So you can see that he's not really well respected. So it's a bit weird that there's so many places and cafes and pubs named after such a vicious man. But there you go, that's Edinburgh for you. So, you've made it to the end in our final story, which is called The Dung Prisoner. Now, if you've ever been to Edinburgh Castle, or you plan to be in Edinburgh Castle in the future, you will step foot in the very dungeons that he was housed. You might be wondering, what's the Dung Prisoner? Well, dung in Scottish terms means shite. So that is what I will be referencing throughout this wee story. So, the prisoner was housed in the dungeons in Edinburgh, and he was planning his escape. And his plans took the bright idea and thought, they take the dung, the shite, out in a wheelbarrow all the time. Why not just climb into that, get whisked out the castle doors unsuspectingly, and make my run for freedom whilst covered in crap? Well, that didn't quite take the way that he thought it would, because they didn't get rid of the excrement through the front door. They chucked it over the edge of the battlement, down the crags. But he obviously didn't know this, so he's climbed into the wheelbarrow, hidden the excrement, and got lobbed over the side of the castle. So he's died on the crags, covered in shite. And that is the story of the Dung Prisoner.
And there we have our spooky, ghosty, scary Edinburgh stories brought to you by Tash. And it's actually been her first proper vlog here on the channel, so hopefully you've enjoyed it, eh?
Be nice to me in the comments.
Yeah, be nice in the comments. If you've liked this kind of video, then let us know. We can do so much more. There's lots of horror and scary stories in Edinburgh, and Scotland itself is steeped in history. But if you like what you've seen, then drop a thumbs up on the video. It really helps us out. It helps these videos spread, and it's absolutely free to click subscribe. So make sure you do. It helps us grow, and it just encourages us to make more content for you. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks, guys.